Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. I am Suzanne and I am thrilled to guide you to today's discussion with two remarkable speakers. First, let me introduce Isabelle Desmeytere, an independent global e-invoicing expert with over 25 years of experience, former owner of IVAT, and a valuable member of several EU workshops. Welcome, Isabelle.
Thank you, Suzanne.
And joining Isabelle, we have Jurgen Soetaert, the innovative founder of DigiCrowd, and an invoicing API expert who is also passionate about Peppol and API integrations. Great to have you with us, Jurgen.
Pleasure to join, Suzanne.
Great. To our audience in the chat, remember you can drop your questions. Our speakers will answer them at the end, and in the meantime, don't hesitate to introduce yourselves. To set the stage, Isabelle, let's go back to the basics. Can you explain to us what is e-invoicing and what it is not?
Sure. So first of all, indeed, let's step back in time. Until like a decade ago, businesses were issuing invoices on paper, put them in an envelope, and were sending that paper invoice to their business partner. That's been a long time, although we do receive some paper invoices still today. But an e-invoice, so what is an e-invoice? It's not a paper invoice, that's clear. An e-invoice is actually an invoice which is issued electronically, so it is an electronic file, but it's a structured file. And a structured file means that a machine can read that file. So then if we look at the PDF, because let's be honest, from paper copy, many business went to PDF. A PDF is an electronic file, but it's not a structured file. So it's actually not directly readable by a machine. Hence, a PDF is often called like a digital invoice, but it's not an e-invoice. It's not the e-invoice that we will be discussing today, because one of the most important characteristics of an e-invoice is that being structured and machine readable.
Interesting. Jurgen, is e-invoicing mandatory in Europe? And what can we expect in the coming years?
Yeah, first, if we're looking at the years behind us, we see that e-invoicing mainly was a thing of B2G transactions. So governments were imposing their suppliers to deliver e-invoices towards them. But right now we see an evolution, years to come, with January 2026 in mind, we see an evolution towards B2B becoming mandatory in several countries around us. And Isabelle will tell more about which countries and what
thank you, Jurgen.
obligations.
So first of all, I would like to mention something on the European VIDA initiative or legislative proposal. I was one of the authors that made the underlying study for VIDA, which was on the basics for drafting the legislative proposal. That proposal is actually a starting point whereby e-invoicing, so structured e-invoicing, would become obligatory for intra-community supplies, so supplies from one member state to another, and as well as for reporting those invoice data. So you send an invoice from supplier to the customer, from one member state to another, plus that has to be electronically, plus you also will have to report the data that is contained in this invoice to your tax authorities. In principle, the VIDA proposal will be voted next week on May 14th. At least it's on the political agenda, so let's wait and see whether that's going to be a fact or not. Also, the scope might change. We don't know what the outcome will be of the voting, of course, what will be the final text. So we will. It's going to be wait and see. As you see on the screen, several countries have e-invoicing on their radar, are starting up, and we will have a closer look to some of these. So the first country, as Jurgen said, where it has been introduced was Italy, 2019. And in Italy, e-invoicing means that the supplier sends the structured e-invoice in the Italian format, a specific Italian format, to the Italian authorities, and the Italian authorities will pass on that invoice to the Italian customer. So it's a fully controlled chain whereby your entire invoice goes to the authorities, and the authorities then sends it onwards. If we look at Poland, Poland was meant to go live this year, but it has been postponed to February 26. It's the same system as in Italy, actually. You do send your entire invoice to the tax authorities, of course in the Polish format. Tax authorities then put it at the disposal of the customer, and the customer will have to pick it up from tax authorities' website. In France, it's been deferred as well, was also meant to become a fact this year. In France, it's actually a little bit more complicated because you've got two systems. Either you can choose to follow the Polish-Italian approach, send it to the French authorities, and they will pass it on to the customer, or you can send an invoice directly. The supplier can send it directly to the buyer with e-reporting of the data. So in France, it's also a combination with e-reporting. Then Germany. Germany is also on the radar for receiving invoices in principle as from next year, but not many details are known yet. For issuing will be 2027. And the German approach is that the only obligation they would impose is that the supplier will send the invoice electronically to the buyer. Regardless what network is being used, there's no data reporting connected to it, because that's the only obligation that would apply in Germany. And then, yeah, probably you would like to know what the Belgian approach will be. So 1st of January 2026, and Belgium has taken the German approach, let's say. So the only obligation that we see in the Belgian legislation is that the supplier will be obliged to issue an e-invoice to the buyer in one of the recommended formats as imposed by the Belgian authority. But I mean, business partners could even opt to use another format. And there will be no e-reporting, but the Belgian government intends to have business use the Peppol network. Whereas in Germany, for example, it's even, you can even send your e-invoice by email in Germany. That would not be the case, or not be really recommended in Belgium. So Belgium is fixed format, Peppol network, and directly from buyer to the customer. But keep in mind, when VIDA becomes applicable, so the European legislation, in the initial proposal that was 2028, let's wait and see what next week will say about that. Then Belgium will have to also introduce, at least for intra-community, e-reporting. So it's not because it's not mandatory today in Belgium or in 2026, according to the current legislation, that it will not come. It is to come, but later.
Thanks, Isabelle. This brings us to a question for the audience. What is your organization's current level of readiness for mandatory e-invoicing? Fully prepared? In progress? Not started yet? Let's give a couple of seconds for everyone to answer. Perfect. Thanks everyone for your interaction. I see some of them are ready, some are just in progress. And Jurgen, why did invoicing become mandatory? What was the decision that drove it?
Okay. In fact, there are different drivers regarding to e-invoicing and becoming mandatory, because main driver by governments was better tax collection, fighting VAT fraud, and closing the VAT gap. To give you an idea, if we're talking about the deficit, the VAT gap in Belgium, only in Belgium, we're talking about 3.5 billion euro a year, which can be collected in a better way, if you're talking about e-invoicing. Another driver for businesses is cost and time saving. And you can in fact elaborate and process your invoices in a much more efficient way if you do it on an electronic way. And those are, in fact, two main drivers. If you compare, for example, for a business, a paper invoice in comparison with an electronic invoice, we're talking about a gain. We know 1 billion invoices are issued each year only in Belgium. We're talking about a gain of 3.5 euro per invoice. So again, we're talking about 3.5 billion euro to be won by companies, in fact, by processing more efficiently their invoices.
Yeah, that's quite relevant. Who would you say is the biggest winner in this story?
Yeah, in fact, there are only winners. If you see at the short term, this will take some investment from companies to get themselves ready till the date of, like Isabelle mentioned, January 2026. But on the mid and the long term, in fact, there are only winners. Governments will be able to collect in a more efficient way their taxes, fighting the fraud, closing the gaps. And for companies, it's also a win because they will be able to reduce costs and time in the process of the invoice. The invoice won't get lost in a mailbox. It will be from machine to machine, resulting in less fraudulent invoices, but also in a faster and a shorter payment term. And that's quite a benefit also for companies at the end.
Definitely. Isabelle, can you comment further on this?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Jurgen is stating. But though, I mean, from a government perspective, we have to be realistic in Belgium that the gain to fight the VAT gap will be not that big because, I mean, the government doesn't see the invoice. Does the government see the invoice today, your paper, your PDF? No. Will the government see your e-invoice? No. So actually, there's little gain for the government if there's no e-reporting connected to your e-invoicing obligation. As I just explained, in Italy, you sent your entire invoice to the authorities. The authorities passes the invoice on to the customer. There, the authorities have a full view on what you've invoiced and what your business partner has bought from you. Same in Poland. In France, you will also have the e-reporting of the data. Belgium and Germany have opted not to do so. So there we have to be realistic. I mean, from a government perspective, that the gain will not be that high. Okay, if one day e-reporting is connected to that, then, I mean, there will be a real gain. And also there will be then less obligations, like, for example, in Belgium, if you would have e-reporting connected into it, then there would be no obligation anymore to have your annual customer listing to be filed in January. So that would drop down that obligation. For me, the biggest gain is indeed at the side of the business. Even if we look at, for example, at Spain, there the proposal for e-invoicing is even triggered by shortening the payment period for small and medium-sized businesses, because we all know that that is a pain from time to time. So indeed, speeding up payments, I mean, identity fraud, that you really buy your invoice to the sender, and then, of course, the AP processing, as Jurgen also stated. These are, for me, today, for Belgium, the biggest winners.
Definitely a lot of different players on this. So Isabelle, why can software companies benefit from all of this, and how can they play a pivotal role?
So if we, as I just said, an e-invoice is a structured e-file, which contains all the details that you have in an invoice. So then, if a business is receiving, as you can see on the screen, this is a simple UBL example. It's one of the formats that will be promoted in Belgium. You see that you immediately see who is the sender, street address, that is not your biggest worry maybe, but the VAT number, also the goods sold, etc. So you will immediately receive an invoice that can be processed by your computer, by your software system. And that is for me the biggest change. I mean, processing your invoices at AP side. Also see, I mean, for the identity fraud, you immediately see who this comes from. So you can process that electronic file without actually any intervention. Today, when you issue an invoice, you know what you're the supplier, you know what you're selling, you issue that invoice is automatically posted in your bookkeeping software. That will not change. I mean, it's not because you're pushing the button make an e-invoice that it will change any of your AR administration. If you push print the invoice, make a PDF or e-invoice, that will not change. But the biggest winner is the one receiving the invoice. So if you're receiving an invoice, it can go directly into your accounting software. Your accounting software has all details in the invoice to like pre-process your invoice, that you only have to like push the button, I accept, or you could even automate that. There are some tools already available today that allow you to do that. But the big difference is when e-invoicing becomes mandatory, all business in Belgium, big ones, small ones, will be working with the same files. So whether you're receiving an invoice from a multinational or whether you're receiving an invoice from the butcher where you go and get your sandwiches for lunch, you will be receiving the same invoice. So you will be able, and that's for your accounting software to do, to process your invoice, every single invoice in the same way. So that, to me, is the biggest game changer, and that will be the benefit for business.
Definitely. Jurgen, so based on all of these, what is the best e-delivery network available today and why?
Yeah. If you look at the most adopted e-invoicing network these times, we certainly have to look at the Peppol network, which it's an initiative of European Commission, but it's not only in Europe. In fact, it's trans-Europe. It's really widely adopted right now. And it meets the conditions, as Isabelle mentions. It's structured, secure network, standardized format, and also the possibility to expand. So, I mean, Peppol is built on the four-corner model. To expand, I mean there is the capability to extend a fifth corner on it for e-reporting in future. How does this work, this Peppol network? In fact, you see it here on the visual presentation. The sender needs an access point, a certified access point. You can't compare it better than with telecommunications. Suzanne, you're at Proximus. Let's say I'm at Telenet. I want to reach you. You have a phone number. I have a phone number as well. We don't need to know about the technicalities and about the provider. I only need this identifier, this unique identifier. So the telephone number in this case. For Peppol, it's similar. But in fact, of the phone number, we're talking about the enterprise number. So I can reach you by your enterprise number and vice versa. In this case, sender needs an access point to send. The sending access point checks if the receiver is reachable on the network, and if yes, the invoice is delivered to the recipient. So that's, in short, how it works.
Okay, and then this brings us back to the audience again, because we would like to ask which aspects of e-invoicing integration do you find the most challenging? 1, understanding regulations, 2, selecting the right e-invoicing service provider, or 3, integrating with existing systems. Give a couple of seconds for everyone to answer. Indeed, I see some people from the audience commenting on understanding regulations. As we can see, it's quite a diverse landscape, so we can understand why. 15 more seconds. I see the answers changing. We have some people mentioning that selecting the right e-invoicing service is the most challenging. So, actually, Jurgen, how can software companies benefit from using an off-the-shelf e-invoicing API?
Yeah, there's certainly for software houses a lot of time and cost savings to realize when implementing an API. Certainly in comparison with on tailor-made integration, for example, or with classic EDI setups as done in the past. So a lot of time and cost savings to realize. Also, simplifying the maintenance is a main advantage of implementing an API for the software houses. For companies, there's a big advantage because they stay compliant with the current and future regulations. And so it's all done by their software partner who integrates an easy to implement API, in fact, like we have Flowen, for example.
Perfect. Well, we're nearing the end of the webinar, so we would like now to give some time for the audience to ask some questions. So please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I see here Peter asking us, what is the four-corner model? We already explained it a bit, but maybe you can give us a quick summary, Jurgen?
Certainly. So the four-corner model, in fact, the four corners in this case are the sender, the sending access point, you see it below. On the right side, you see the receiving access point, and then you see on top of it the recipient. And if you take those four parties, in fact, you have the four-corner model. So the sender needing an access point to send, the access point from the sender communicating with the access point of the receiver to see if the recipient is reachable on the network, and then delivering the invoice to the final recipient of the invoice. And that's where we come to the four corners. When adding e-reporting on top of that, we're talking about the fifth corner. So that's, like Isabelle also mentioned, next steps with VIDA in mind. Certainly e-reporting will be something that becomes applicable.
Yeah. So indeed, everything is connected.
Yeah.
Perfect. I do see another question here for Isabelle. In your experience, what are some common pitfalls that software companies encounter when integrating e-invoicing, and how can they avoid them?
Yeah, I do have some experience indeed in helping out software suppliers with building e-invoicing solutions. And what the biggest recommendation I can give is that as a software supplier, you start from the required format as imposed by the government. So for Belgium, unfortunately, you'll have to wait until Belgium issues the format with the content, with the required content, the mandatory content and the optional content, because if we look at all published formats throughout Europe, there's some mandatory fields, there's some optional fields that are optional in some situation become mandatory for certain transactions. So for me, it's important that a software supplier starts from the list of content, of data elements that we see in the required file, and then simply sees if all those data elements are somewhere in the software. Because if the data element is not in your software, you can't get it out to get it into the e-file. So if you do have the complete list in your software, doesn't mean that you have to make it mandatory, because if you have small users versus somewhat big users, they don't have the same kind of transactions. But you have to make sure that you allow through your software for your business, the business using your software, that they can be compliant. And when can they be compliant? If they have the option to at least fill in the full data set, the full all data elements. And then, of course, it's a prerequisite that the service provider you're using, the API, can also import all those data elements. And that's also some task to do as a software company, to check that the API, or whatever you name it, is being used to connect the API. I hear lots of terms. That it can consume all data elements to come to the legal format. And it's not like, oh, this is like 80% of what's mostly used. We stick to that 80%. And that's a major error. Make sure that you do cover 100% so that at least your users can be compliant. You have to give them the possibility to be compliant, and that's a starting point. And actually, I say like, okay, the current format for Belgium is not yet known. Yeah, but on the other hand, if you take the UBL 2.1, it's 2.1 now.
Yeah, the Peppol BIS,
or the Peppol BIS, it's a starting point. It will be extended for sure, but if you already start with that, and you make sure you have those data elements, and then when the official format content is being published, you add those elements, well, you're on the good track, and you will make it in time, because January 2026 seems far away.
But it isn't.
But it isn't.
It's tomorrow.
Think of 31st of December of 2025, and it sounds a lot closer. Well, that's not when it has to be ready. It has to be ready beforehand. It has to be tested. Your users need to be trained. Users will want to test it. So I would say, like, for software companies, they should be ready by mid next year. That's
certainly.
like 1 more year to go.
At the latest.
It's not much.
Certainly.
Yeah.
I'm happy to see right now, I'm since October, I'm in many discussions with software houses, and I see happily that there are a lot of contacts, software reaching out to us who are aware of this mandate coming towards them and their clients. So we had a lot of calls on this topic to inform them, to show them our API and so on. So I feel right about it because there is a lot of fuzz and a lot of interaction right now on this topic.
Yeah.
So I'm confident that software companies know, and if not, it's also responsibility of the entrepreneur of the company to contact his software, telling them, okay, this is coming towards you and us, so you need us to be compliant, and you need to help us as a software.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of interest in the market for this. And actually, I see 2 more questions. So Pascal is asking, will there remain multiple formats like UBL, .be, EFF, etc.?
At least there will be the choice between UBL and CI. But the Belgian legislation also foresees the possibility that 2 business partners agree on a format. In principle, you should be able to produce a UBL or a CI, but there will be other possibilities as well. Although I do think that the UBL, especially the UBL, because CI, to my understanding, is less used, will be very prominent, and it's then the task of the software suppliers or the service providers to convert it. But it's not like there will be a multitude of formats to convert into one format. And indeed, today we have the UBL.be. Will it remain the UBL.be? No. Will it be exactly the Peppol BIS 3.0 of today? No. It will be something else. Will it be completely different from those 2? No. It will be, it's very dangerous to make a statement about it. Let's say it will be 90% the same. Could be 85, could be 95, could be 99, but that will be the direction that it's going. So how to prepare? Take the UBL.be, take the Peppol BIS 3.0, and you're going in the good direction. If you do want to prepare, if you do want to get ready, that's a very good starting point.
Maybe interesting as well for the audience. So if you take, like Isabelle mentions, the Peppol BIS 3, if you look internationally, if you took and support Peppol BIS 3, you're quite along. You have taken some track. So
yeah. If you do want to prepare, that's the way to go for it. Yeah. Will it end there? No. You will have extra work. That's also something to keep in mind. It's not that if you do that, you're safe. No. You will have to do some extra things, but that's the best direction to prepare.
Yeah. I guess these are good guidelines for the audience. We have another question from Mark. We use different billing programs that use different Peppol access points. So we would send from different access points. Is that possible?
Sending from different access points. That's a good point. In fact, it all depends on how the access points treats the enterprise, the company. If being, for example, our access point, Codabox, Isabelle Group, we don't subscribe senders on the Peppol network. You have other access points, for example, in Belgium, who do subscribe. So if you're subscribed to an access point, you can only be subscribed once, and so that's something which may be a conflict, in fact. But I don't see it. I mostly don't see it on the sending side. I mostly see it on the receiving side, because there, all access points, we as well, we subscribe our SME from Codabox behind the accountants. We subscribe them as a receiver on the Peppol network. And when working with us, they are locked within our access point. So it's the SME, the company, deciding with which access points he wants to work. Regarding future, I foresee that there will be interoperability. It's a main topic, Isabelle knows as well, on the European level. It's a main topic, interoperability between access points. Right now, it's a manual process. The SME has to tell me, us, Codabox, I don't want to be subscribed at your access point anymore. I want to be subscribed at access point Y. So that's how it works right now. This will be automated in the years to come, certainly.
Isabelle, do you have something to comment on?
No, I mean, I'm not the IT technical expert, but indeed, that's also the story I've heard. So I can confirm what Jurgen is saying. And indeed, I mean, the more that e-invoicing becomes a mass product, let's say, the more interoperability that will have to be complied with. It won't be a choice anymore to be interoperable. It will be a must, not just from a legal perspective, but also from a business, from a market perspective. So at a certain moment in time, there will be no buts anymore, no options anymore. It'll just have to be.
Yeah. To go further onto the question of the participants, in fact, the conflict on the sending side is, at this point in time, it's something like on the level of the message level response. So being a sender, you get feedback of the access point of the invoice being sent or not. Right now, this is on the level, you're subscribed on the level of the company. And so you can only be subscribed once. In future, and this is also agreed on Peppol, this will not be on the SME level, being the sender, but on the level of the access point. So the access point will be able to give the feedback of the MLR, not only to one software package, but to many others. So the access point will be the distributor of the invoice, which can be delivered at that moment at several locations. So this will be solved as well.
And would this then also solve, if I'm thinking a little bit more internationally, I'm a Belgian company with a German VAT number and a Belgian number, so I would have German obligation in Belgium, was that it can be distributed?
At this moment, yeah.
Not yet, no. Today, but in future, because if I have my obligations in Germany, I have my obligations in Belgium.
Yeah.
I can't put them together.
Like it's on the table right now, it will be the sender of the invoice will have to report in the country of issuance and the recipient on the country of reception. So this will be very simple, in fact. So this will be solved indeed.
Yeah.
Okay, we still have a couple of minutes left in case someone else wants to drop their questions. I see another question for Jurgen. How do you see the role of software companies evolving in the future of e-invoicing, particularly with emerging technologies like AI and blockchain?
Oh, that's a good one, in fact. I see the role of the softwares continuing in improving automated processing of documents, that's for sure. Where I see AI or blockchain, this will be in adding value on top of data the software house already processes. For example, within our group, Isabelle Group, we have ClearFacts, being our pre-accounting solution, who created a functionality called confidence levels. So in fact, this functionality gives the proposition and the level of confidence on an automated booking. And in that regards, the accountant can see 80%, 90% confidence. So I don't need to check this because it's on base of all the data already present in the system. The system creates a proposal which is very confident. And I see this further evolving in that direction because you're on top of a lot of data and it's time to do something with this.
And maybe I can add, indeed,
Sure.
the e-invoicing obligation is like the basics you need to do all this, because if you don't have your data structured in a machine-readable format, you can't do anything with AI, you can't do anything with blockchain. First step is digitize your transactions, your invoicing, your orders. Without that, without having machine-readable data, you can forget about all the rest. So to me, this is, I mean, the legislation is very welcome to speed up the digitization of the Belgian companies, especially the smaller companies, so that they are on the train and they can benefit from the reaping the savings. And I think, I mean, if I also have my very little company. This is frightening. You say, like, what's it going to cost? Is it going to be complex? Oh no, what's next? But I do think from a future perspective, and also today, that is a very welcome legislation. So we should look at it from the positive side, although I do agree for many small businesses it's frightening.
Yeah. Each of those small businesses will have to choose a software. And in that moment in time, that isn't the case. Almost 50% are still issuing their invoices within Word or Excel.
Sure.
So this will certainly disappear. And the choice of the right invoicing ERP solution, this is something companies can pay attention to right now, and not within a year. Because
yes, indeed. And that's why it's very important to start training, to start creating awareness towards the very, very small ones, to offer to them solutions, cheap solutions, easy solutions, and really to see what is the best approach. How are they working today? Do they have to change their processes? Because even if you're small, you do have your own process. If that's every night you go behind your computer and you make a Word document, you open Word to make your invoice, or is that every week that you send your data to your accountant? I mean, it's a process, and that process will have to change. So, and it would be good also that small businesses and accountants know as soon as possible what will be available, what will be made available on the market as solutions, because so they can help their clients to decide well in time what the most appropriate way forward is. Because it's going to be a change, it's going to be a big change.
Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree on what Isabelle says. So the role of the accountant is the one of consultant, helping their clients towards the upcoming mandate, and they have certainly a pivot role to play there.
Certainly. I think we all agree that mandatory invoicing is more than just a checkbox. It's the opportunity to enhance customer experience and maximize profit. So I want to thank you, Jurgen and Isabelle, for your insights, and everyone in the audience for their participation. We hope to see you soon.